Good evening. Welcome to the overnight edition of From Day One. As you hear our bells warming up in the background, he'll be with us in just a few seconds tonight, November 17, 2015, with Kevin Randle on UFO coverage.
High desert and the great American Southwest, I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be in the world's 25 time zones, each and every one of them covered like a warm, fuzzy blanket by this program, Midnight in the Desert. My name is Art Bell, and I'm glad to be here. The rules of our show are so simple during the week. No bad language and only one call per show. Okay, late breaking news. 2 Air France flights have been diverted. Probably because of bomb threats in both cases, I would imagine. Flight 65, Air France, diverted to Salt Lake City, coming out of L.A. They were on the way to Paris, probably over the pole. It was an Airbus 380, and that's a big one. 300 to 500 passengers, something like that. And then just a few moments later, an Air France plane from Dulles in Washington, Paris, Flight 55, diverted to Halifax, Nova Scotia. So, in both cases, hitting Air France. And that's, of course, going to hurt them somewhat economically and give the country more of the jitters and lots of passengers, the jitters, I'm sure. French police now are hunting for a second fugitive directly involved, they say, in the deadly Paris attacks. As France made, get this, an unprecedented demand that its European Union allies support its military action against the Islamic State group. Did you hear that? Including the president who spoke from Manila in the Philippines, where he presently is, going after them for that, suggesting it's a little ridiculous that we'd be afraid of widows and little children, boys and girls. There's an awful lot of, I don't know how many, guys in their 20s and 30s we bring over here from, I don't think many. But yeah, I mean, they would be a worry. I can see why they would be a worry. And some of the widows are also not to be trusted. A lot of them lost husbands over there due to reasons that would give them reason to be unhappy with us. And oh, by the way, before we leave the subject of ISIS, this kind of confirms what the doctor said last night. OP Paris, it's called. There's an article in RT Live breaking today, the 17th rather, that hacktivist group, get this, Anonymous, has reported that more than 5,500 Twitter accounts belonging to the Islamic State, have been taken down. It comes after the collective declared a total war on the militant group following the Paris attacks, and again echoing what was said here last night. Tweeting from its Op Paris account, Anonymous stated, we report more than 5,500 Twitter accounts of ISIS are now down. Op Paris. Hashtag Anonymous. Hashtag expect us. U.S. us. So good for them. Good for Anonymous. They're doing a good thing. I can see a possible reason why the U.S. government might not consider it to be a good thing. We monitor all those accounts, right, for chatter. But from what I've heard, the real chatter that goes on is done with encrypted apps, which you can get anywhere. You get 5 minutes, you can get an encrypted app. And so it's my understanding that's really how they're communicating. Now, whether that would be true, I guess it would, from continent to continent as well. Charlie Sheen declaring his bad boy days are over now. And also, he declared he's HIV positive. Doing okay on medicine. Matt Lauer on NBC asked him if he'd transmitted to anybody else, and he declared impossible. I don't know. It would be interesting to have that defined. Impossible, really. Maybe there is some reason that it's physically impossible. What do I know? So, the world continues to shake, rattle, and roll, courtesy of ISIS, and we're going to have to get them. I think that's it. We're going to have to get them. They have to be exterminated. And that's generally a word you would only use with regard to vermin or bugs, right? But I think that's the case with ISIS. Extermination is called for. You know, and I know that brings some angry retort out there. And I know that there are liberals who just don't agree with it. I say exterminate it. They have to actually be. The only thing they care about is killing us. That's it. That's all they care about, killing us. They don't care if they have to give their lives to achieve that goal. So, you know, I don't see what choice there is. If you have something that just wants to kill you, then it seems to me that you've got to deal with it. One way or the other, you've got to deal with it. All right, coming up in a moment. Quite a show, I would imagine. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Kevin D. Randle has now, for more than 45 years, studied the UFO phenomenon in all its various incarnations, and there have been many. Training by the Army as a helicopter pilot, intelligence officer, and military policeman, also by the Air Force as both an intel officer and a public affairs officer. All that provided Randle with a keen insight into the operations and protocols of the military and into the UFO phenomenon, which has puzzled people for more than a century, including me. During his investigations, he has traveled the U.S. to interview hundreds of witnesses who were involved in everything from the Roswell, New Mexico crash of '47, the repeated radar sightings of UFOs over Washington, D.C. in '52, to the very latest abduction cases. Randle was among the first writers to review the declassified Project Blue Book files, so he's been around for a while, right? First to report on animal mutilations, alien abductions, alien home invasions, and among the first to suggest humans are working with extraterrestrials. In a moment, Kevin Randle.
Midnight in the Desert via Skype worldwide. If on a computer, please be sure to use a headphone mic and call MITD 51. That's MITD 51.
Always be sure to use a headphone mic when you call, or you can do it on a, regular phone. Not a regular phone, an iPhone or a Android. All right, here, ladies and gentlemen, is Kevin Randle. Kevin, welcome to Midnight in the Desert.
I am delighted to be here.
Well, delighted to have you. It's been how long since we talked, do you think?
It's been several years. I think it was right after I got back from Iraq that was the last time we talked, and I've been back for 10 years.
Oh, boy, that is a long time. All right. So, Kevin, we're going to talk about UFOs tonight, but maybe it really makes sense to start out asking you about what has been the biggest, I guess, news of the year of this sort, and that is, of course, the Kepler discovery of the megastructures around star KIC 8462852.
And I have declared that the planet should be called Randle's World.
Well, I'm afraid
nobody else has given it a name. We've got that long string of numbers to go with it.
Yeah, actually, they have given it a name.
Oh, nuts.
Kevin. It's the way it goes. It was the gal who discovered it, and I think, I'm trying to remember now. Let's see. It was Tabby. That's it, Tabby.
Well, that was my big claim to fame, I think. but the thing is, I mean, what is incredible is that they're able to discover these planets, circling stars. This one's, 1,500 light years away?
1,480 to be exact.
I was close.
Mm-hmm.
And to make these determinations is just incredible. And now they have a structure that they can't explain scientifically other than it might be artificial. And that would be just wonderful news. Although I think given the distance, we don't need to worry about them showing up tomorrow. Unless they understand something about space travel that we do not. And obviously, if you're traveling interstellar distances, you certainly do.
Kevin, well, nobody's saying they travel interstellar distances, but they have this megastructure which would be harnessing the power of a sun. Now, you might want to move the microphone a little further away from your mouth. Where I keep mine, just so you know, Kevin, is between my lips and my chin. If you put it there, then you don't get a lot of breath sounds and you don't have a lot of trouble.
What can I say? I'm new to the 21st century technology.
I understand.
And the mics that we used in the Army on our helmets, you had to put it right up against your lips or you couldn't understand what people were saying. So.
Right. Well, we are past that.
Yes, way past that, I'm afraid.
Okay.
But this structure is just absolutely fascinating. I think that I worry that it's going to turn out like some of the other evidences of artificiality that we've discovered in the past have turned out to be natural phenomenon. But at the moment, we don't have a good explanation for it, and it's just wonderful information suggesting life beyond the solar system.
All right. Well, so here's the thing. We have to remember that they are 1,480 light years away, Kevin, and because of that, that would mean that this megastructure or megastructures that we're seeing, I believe it's many that they're seeing, would have been constructed 1,480 years ago. So one can only wonder, if you look at the past 50 years of our progress, Kevin, how much progress they would have made in the last 1,480 years.
Or go back to my grandparents being born before there were cars, before there were airplanes, before there was radio, before there was television.
Yes.
In the late 19th century, the 1890s, and look what they saw in their lifetime, including people walking on the moon. And now we look at it in our lifetimes, and you and I are discussing this on worldwide radio over something called the Internet.
Mm-hmm.
So you look back at what we've been able to do in the last 50 years, or the last 100 years, and think if you had the technological base to build on, what you would be able to do, or what we would be able to do 1,500 years in the future. There's just no telling how far we could range through the cosmos.
Well, here's something I thought was silly. Well, it wasn't silly, but I mean, the Allen telescopes, Green Bank, turned their dishes toward the star for about a week. They didn't hear anything, and everybody went, oh, well, which is crazy because, number one, who's to say in this little tiny span of a week that we're going to hear anything at all, or that we could hear anything at all from something that far away? So it's just as valid today as the day they announced the possibility of these being megastructures. The fact that the telescopes didn't hear any signals saying, yo-ho, Earth, doesn't mean a thing.
And, well, the other thing to look at is we just assume they use radio. Maybe they don't.
Well, yeah.
And of course, I probably shouldn't say that to you that they don't use radio, but...
No, I don't think they do, Kevin. So, they would be light years, so to speak, ahead of that.
Well, but the radio signal would be coming from 1,480 years ago. Mm-hmm. And you look at it from our point of view. Also, we've been radiating radio signals for 120 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that's always scared me about this is an alien race picks up the radio signals we're radiating, and what they get is like Laverne and Shirley.
Yeah,
they don't get the intelligent end of the spectrum. They get the opposite end of it. And
Well, and for that reason, they would probably immediately destroy us.
Or avoid us completely.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, there we have that. Now you've got a new book out, right?
Yes.
What is it called?
The UFO Dossier, and it is a follow-up on the government UFO secrets, which looked at what the U.S. government had been doing for 50 or 60 years. This expands it out into a worldwide arena. So we're looking at not only what the United States has done, but we're looking at it from a worldwide perspective. And what we're seeing is how the U.S. has affected other nations in their UFO research and how they've kind of been able to manipulate things so the foreign governments aren't taking a serious look at UFOs because of what the United States Air Force and what the United States government has done. So we're looking at all of that, but we look at the French reports, we look at things from Great Britain, we look at Australia, we look at a lot of different things telling us how they've investigated UFOs and what they've found.
Well, has the totality of the evidence from here and around the world really truly convinced you that we are being visited, number one?
I think if you look at the evidence, you don't look at what people have said, what the opinions are, and you ignore, purposely you ignore some of the government studies that have been done because clearly they were biased and clearly they were designed with one goal, which was to end interest in UFOs. But if you look at the totality of the evidence from the landing trace cases, the radar sightings that are also visual radar sightings, if you will, you look at the photographic evidence that is available, you look at some of the recovered materials that have been analyzed, then you begin to understand that there's a good body of evidence of something going on. Then when you bring in the observational data from a lot of pilots, scientists, educated people, what you see is overwhelming evidence that visitation is taking place.
All right. Well, I have had a number of people who agree with you on lately, and some of them actually think an invasion could be actually going on. What do you think?
We haven't seen any really overt hostile moves since this whole thing began. And people say, well, it began in 1947 with Kenneth Arnold. I think it actually began with the Foo Fighters during World War II, and there's a continuity of intelligence work that started with the Foo Fighters during the Second World War that moved to the United States prior to the Arnold sighting and then became an official investigation. So we've got this long history of looking at this information, these sightings taking place, observation of these craft around the earth, and it doesn't seem that they're overtly hostile. When there has been something that happened, it normally is either initiated by us or is our approaching too close to their craft and being injured in that way. It doesn't seem like they're injuring people on purpose. So I'm not sure that we've got an invasion coming, but we've certainly got an observation going on. And I suppose you could say, I did an article, one of my first articles, which was back in the 1970s, I called it Reconnaissance of Earth, which explained how the observations were going on. And so you might say that's an ongoing reconnaissance building up to something like that. But at this point, I just don't see the hostility that some others have seen.
Well, I don't mean
of course, they may be right, and I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, I don't mean giant craft hovering over our cities or anything like that, with death rays coming down. It's Dr. Jacobs.
Yes.
You know Dr. Jacobs. And
yes.
He thinks that this is an ongoing situation, that we are being invaded slowly but surely by abductees, if you will, half human, half alien. I keep hearing a thump there.
I don't know why.
It's interesting. There it is again. Are you touching your mic?
No.
Kevin?
I'm sitting as still as I possibly can.
Wonder what that is. There it is again.
So that you couldn't blame the thump on me.
Okay. All right. So anyway, he believes that we are essentially being integrated, if you will, and that eventually we'll be more or less replaced.
Yes, I've read his books and looked at his theories, and they're interesting, but it's I'm not sure that the evidence completely supports that conclusion. There's some interesting evidence, and as you mentioned in the introduction, I think I'm the first one to report the aliens being inside a house, and this was the Pat Roach abduction that took place in 1973. Reported it in Saga's UFO report in 1976, mentioning the aliens inside the house, and then the family or members of the family are moved outside to the ship for their examinations, that sort of thing. So we see that sort of thing going on, and I know Betty Hill talked about, I think she said at one point she thought there were a lot of little Betty Hills running around out in space, which would be suggestive of some sort of genetic experimentation taking place.
Yes, well, most, Kevin, of our abductions do seem to involve some sort of reproductive something or another going on. In other words, they take sperm samples, they take eggs, they do all kinds of things. I even got an email here recently from a nurse, Kevin, in which she documents, I'm hearing that again, whatever it is, I don't know what that could be. At any rate, she documents a missing fetus, Kevin.
There's a lot of that information that has been published, and a number of scientists have looked into it to see if they could corroborate that sort of information. There's some interesting corroboration that has gone on out there. I think it was Dr. Richard Neal had looked into that before his untimely passing, which was 20 years ago now, I think.
Okay, of those abductions and or contacts that you have investigated, how many have involved this sort of thing?
I haven't done an awful lot in the abduction arena recently, because there are some abductions that are clearly terrestrially based, meaning simply that it's a psychological phenomenon as opposed to something physical.
Sure.
And I never felt qualified to deal with those sorts of people that might need the psychological help. So I always try to, if somebody contacts me about an abduction problem, to direct them to one of the researchers who is involved in that sort of research, like Kathleen Martin, for example, who was the niece of Betty Hill. I think I sent a number to Yvonne Smith, because I thought their research and their qualifications for that kind of investigation were better than mine. So I haven't done a lot with the abduction research in the last number of years. I've concentrated more on a physical aspect of it, like the Roswell case, or looking at the documentation and trying to get that brought forward.
All right. With regard to the only time that I'm hearing this noise is when you're not talking, Kevin. So it's something you're doing when you're not talking, like now.
I'm sitting here quietly.
Okay. It may be the USB connection, or I'm not sure what it is, but if it continues, what I'll do is call you on the phone.
Okay.
So we can get a connection without this noise.
I'm sitting quietly because you mentioned the thumping noise.
I believe
I think it's the NSA, personally.
I blame most things on them, actually. So could be.
But I tried to make sure everything is stable.
Right. Again, this only.
And I'm not hearing anything at all. So
you're not.
No.
Right. Well, it's a mic noise. It's like you're hitting the. For example, if I hit my mic, that's what you hear. Or if I do that, or it's only when it's something you're doing when you're not talking, whatever that is.
I'm just sitting here. I haven't touched the mic or anything. I have my hands on my desk.
All right. Keep them there.
I'll be glad to.
Yeah, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out one way or the other. So you did, I know, research the hell out of Roswell. I mean, you really spent a lot of time on Roswell. So I'd like to get your insights. I know something I do want to get covered is that I believe you had some work done, or someone had some work done on that famous memo that somebody was holding.
General Ramey.
General Ramey, yes. Trying to clarify exactly what that memo said. Am I right?
Yes.
Do we now know what it said?
Unfortunately, we have not been able to clarify it at all, much more than originally was done.
So high definition of a low def product doesn't add much. All right, hold tight. We'll get right back to you. My guest is Kevin Randle. We're talking about ufology, the history of it.
Who's gonna tell you when it's too late? Who's gonna tell you things? Into this house we're born, into this world we're thrown, like a dog without a bone, an actor out of role, riders on the storm.
Come on, men and women. Skype up. Call Midnight in the Desert at MITD 51. That's MITD 51.
Back now to Kevin Randle, who has been investigating UFOs for, well, nearly all his adult life, I guess. And, Kevin, you're back on the air again.
Well, that's good to be there, I guess.
Good. We'll see how well it goes here. Actually, we tried Kevin's landline number, and that was full of hum, so we're giving this another try on Skype. Anyway, as I mentioned, there was an effort to get a high-definition look at that document, and sure enough, you got a high-definition look of what was originally a low. In other words, garbage in, garbage out. Doesn't matter if you try to go to high def, you still can't read it, right?
Well, the thinking was that our technology has evolved to the point where we might be able to see something, and using the latest software and some better microscopic camera equipment, that sort of thing, we thought if we could focus on that part of the negative, it might tell us something a little bit more. We could read it to a greater degree than we have been able in the past. There are some words that are readable in it, and almost everybody agrees that they're there. I think it says Fort Worth, Texas at one point, and the term weather balloons and disk seem to be almost universally accepted by people who have looked at this. And we were hoping that by applying the latest technology, using getting new scans directly from the negatives, and the people at the University of Texas at Arlington were very helpful in that, getting some of the better scans and seeing if we couldn't use some of our latest software to kind of determine what was seen. We've opened it up. We've sent copies of those scans to a number of people, both at the believer end of the spectrum and the skeptical end of the spectrum, hoping that we can get some kind of a universal read on this. And unfortunately, the going has been very slow, and we haven't been able to resolve some of the issues. One of the key phrases was victims of the wreck, apparently is on this thing. And if you look at it one way, it looks an awful lot like that term is there. And if it says victims of the wreck, well, then you've got something that is very positive in the way of the Roswell crash. But others have said, well, maybe it's viewing. And if it's viewing, even if it's viewing of the wreck, then that takes it in a different direction. So we've got some issues we're trying to work out on this, and hoping that by opening it up to a wider range of people looking at it, that somebody might be able to resolve the issues to the satisfaction of most people. And I don't think we're ever going to be able to get everybody happy with a reading of this thing unless we could find the actual message somewhere to compare it. But I think we could come to a point, or we'd hope to come to a point where we could get a large majority of the people agreeing on what the text says.
Okay. I understand that you have researched some abduction cases recently, and I, of course, interviewed Travis Walton. In fact, I did it again not long ago. His story has always remained consistent, Kevin, and there's a lot of witnesses who went through a lot of lie detector tests. I think it's the most legit story that I've heard to date. When you look at abduction cases, what do you think?
I look at cases like Travis Walton and the Hills case as a more likely scenario because it seemed that they were targets of opportunity, that they're out in a remote area late at night or early in the evening, I guess, with Travis Walton, but they were sort of targets of an opportunity. And I've talked to Travis Walton a couple of times. I've talked to Steve Pierce. I think Pierce first really began telling his aspect of the story 2 or 3 years ago, and I had an opportunity to sit down with him and get his point of view and learn what the ramifications have been for him.
Well, tell me what he said.
He was on board that, yeah, Travis Walton was abducted, but the thing is, I think Philip Klass had talked to Pierce, and it got the idea that Pierce wanted to be paid a great deal of money for his story to kind of out Travis Walton. And I think it was the way Klass phrased the questions and Pierce misunderstanding it. So it's not really that Pierce disagrees with what Walton says. He actually, when I talked to him, suggested that the abduction was real, that there wasn't any kind of dispute amongst the people involved in that. With Mike Rogers and Steve Pierce and Travis Walton and the other fellows involved, there was really no dispute amongst them about what they'd seen and what had happened on there. And it was Klass kind of manipulating the data for his own point of view, which we've seen any number of times with Klass manipulating data. So Pierce was agreeing with what Walton said, but he talked about how he had been. I think it was Klass had talked about $10,000 and wanted Pierce to come out and say that Walton hadn't been abducted, and that kind of thing, and Pierce didn't do it. So that would speak highly of both Pierce and Walton, that he wouldn't take a bribe to deny the thing took place. I mean, $10,000 to a guy who's at that end of the economic spectrum is a great deal of money.
Yes, it is.
And you'd expect if he had a chance to get it by just saying, well, yeah, I wasn't involved, or it didn't really take place the way Travis said it did.
No, that's quite an accusation you're making, that Klass offered $10,000 to elicit essentially a lie, is what you're saying.
That is what Steve Pierce had suggested to me, that Klass had been manipulating the data. But I've seen Klass do that any number of times in the past. I mean, you look at what he's done. He went after James McDonald because he didn't like his UFO research and got him a number of his Navy contracts for atmospheric research canceled because the Navy didn't want to get involved in UFO research. He went after a fellow at a private university for claiming that he had been involved in a UFO sighting, and the university's attitude was, screw you, Philip Klass, we don't care. The Navy, because Aviation Week and Space Technology did an awful lot of investigative reporting on that, didn't want to get caught up in something like that. So, I mean, Klass manipulated the data frequently like that. And from what I understand from Pierce thought Klass was offering him $10,000 to tell the truth. And it just never came out that way.
To tell the truth.
Yes.
But that is...
Tell Klass's truth.
Yes, Klass's truth. Just let's come out and say it, a lie, to tell a lie, because he passed a lie detector test saying the whole thing was real, right?
Yes.
So you're really talking about somebody offering money to tell a lie in plain language.
Sure. But I mean, we've seen that an awful lot in the, I'll say debunker. I don't want to really smear skeptics with this kind of a brush, because the skeptics are, I think, operating from a point of honesty. This is what they sincerely believe, and they look at the evidence and they interpret it differently than the rest of us do. They set the bar higher for their level of evidence, I guess.
Well, I do too. I'm skeptical. I've had my own incredible sighting. I'm still skeptical. I don't know what I saw. I mean, I know what I saw. I don't know whether it could be from our government or it could be from some other planet. I just, star system.
Yes.
I have no idea. So I remain somewhat skeptical and interested in proof. That's the reason I've enjoyed the Travis story, because I don't know, there's so many witnesses. There's so much to it. What other stories would you put up in that class with a lot of witnesses, or something you can verify and put your hand around?
I think one of the best cases is Levelland, Texas, from November of 1957.
What happened there?
This was a case. Any number of people saw a craft close to the ground. It stalled their car engines. It dimmed their headlights. It filled their radios with static. And then when it left their car, they could start their cars again. They could drive off. Their radios cleared up, and the lights came back. What happened was the Air Force claimed that there were only 3 witnesses to this event. Don Kehoe, who was the director for NICAP, which was a civilian organization, said there were 9 witnesses, and the Air Force and NICAP were arguing about the number of witnesses rather than investigating the case. And when I went back and looked at the Project Blue Book files and the files from QFOS, the Center for UFO Studies, and some other organizations, I found witnesses at 13 separate locations who had seen the craft on the ground and talked about it stalling their car engines and that sort of thing. Here's an event where the craft is interacting with the environment. You've got witnesses from the entire social economic spectrum. You've got well-educated people. You've got college people. You've got people who finished high school. You've got Pedro Saucedo, who was the guy that I think reported it first to the sheriff. He was a Korean War veteran. Mm-hmm. So you've got a wide range of people seeing this thing. Now, Don Burleson, who lives in Roswell, New Mexico, in 2000 went to Levelland and it actually interviewed the daughter of the sheriff and the sheriff's widow. And they said that the sheriff had been told by the Air Force not to talk about it to anybody. Just say you saw the thing in the distance and let it go at that. But according to the daughter, there was landing traces on a ranch near Levelland, Texas. So you would have had a landing trace case, which left physical evidence on the ground. You've got the interaction with the environment, and you've got witnesses, independent witnesses, at 13 separate locations. Now, about 2 hours after the sightings ended at Levelland, a series of sightings took place at White Sands, New Mexico, which may be directly related to this. And I had an opportunity. There were 4 military policemen involved in the sighting.
Yes. Why do you think related?
Because it took place the object left the Levelland area, apparently got to the White Sands area some 2 hours later. So it seems logical it's the same object
or at least
being
possible.
Seen.
Yeah, at least possible.
But I had an opportunity to talk to one of the MPs. And what is interesting here, there were 4 MPs involved. The Air Force interviewed 3 of them. The 4th one was unavailable because he was suddenly on a 3-day pass. Well, those of us who've been in the military understand that a 3-day pass limits how far you can go, and you have to leave a contact number in case you have to come back.
Oh, yes.
So there's no reason for the Air Force not to have interviewed that 4th guy, unless the story I heard that the guy was actually in the hospital is true. And I've been trying to get the morning reports from the military, which they've got them on file in St. Louis, to see if I can determine where that guy was that week the Air Force was doing the investigation. But it was a series of sightings. The skeptics or the debunkers wrote it off as, well, the guys got fooled by the moon or they got fooled by Venus. And the fellow I talked to, a guy named Glenn Toy, said that they had seen the object come down in front of the mountains and hover not far above the ground, maybe 200, 300 yards away from them. So they're seeing the object close to the ground. They're not seeing it up in the sky, and the clouds aren't fooling them and any of that stuff. They're seeing it close to the ground. And then it took off. But one of the soldiers was apparently injured by this and was in the base hospital. But the Air Force didn't investigate him. And what I'd like to see is the morning report to see if it will tell me that the guy was on pass or if he was in fact in the hospital. Because there'd be no reason for the military to lie on the morning reports or the Army to lie on these morning reports. Because they wouldn't believe that anybody would even look at that, so they would explain where the guy was. If he's not available for duty, they've got to explain where he is. And if he was on a 3-day pass, that would be in the morning report. If he was in the base hospital, that would be in the morning report. And I have not been able to get those. I wrote for this stuff. The people in St. Louis sent me a letter that says, well, you need to send us $8.30 so we can search the records, and you need to tell us a specific time frame, and we won't look at anything more than 90 days. I sent them a 1-week time frame. And that was a response I got, and I sent them the $8.30, and they sent the same form letter back and cashed my check for $8.30. So I'm out $8 and still don't have the morning.
Was that a Freedom of Information request?
No, that was just a standard request.
Okay.
Now, if you submit a Freedom of Information request, they can still charge you for it.
Oh yeah.
So I haven't been able to get the information about this guy, whether or not he was in the base hospital. I know his name. His last name was Eubanks. He was like a Spec 4, an E4 at the time that this took place. So and I've tried to find the family. But the only people I've talked to, the fellow I was looking for had passed away. But I did talk to Glenn Toy, who was his partner that day. So but this is a series of sightings that the craft interacted with the environment. The descriptions from the witnesses are pretty much similar. And they were scattered all over the Texas Panhandle, from north of Level Land down south. I think it's Shallow Water, Texas. It's all right around the Lubbock, Texas area. Mm-hmm. The Air Force sent an NCO to investigate, and he spent most of the day talking to a couple of people and said there's nothing to it. It was caused by bad weather in the area. Thunderstorms had moved through and all that. James McDonald looked at it and says, the weather records don't support that there had been rain earlier in the afternoon, but not at 11 o'clock at night when the sightings began.
Does it surprise you that the Roswell records, that one would think would be very, very, very important, have been, according to the military, lost?
I don't think they're lost. I think they have them. I think the problem was the questions were poorly phrased, and it went to specific places where the records wouldn't be kept anymore, so that they could say, well, we have no records that are responsive to your request. Which is not to say that the records don't exist. It's just that the way you phrased your question might have been wrong.
Actually, it seems to me a U.S. representative got that answer, and that they actually came back and said they cannot be located, lost.
Stephen Schiff.
He'd be the one, yes.
He was the congressional representative for the Roswell District of New Mexico.
Yes.
At the time. And he asked questions about it, and they said that some of the records from Roswell had been destroyed or improperly destroyed at the time. And I mean, as an intelligence officer, part of my duties was to destroy classified material that was out of date. But if it was classified secret or above, you had to specify specifically what the title of the document was and what the date of it was, so you could demonstrate that it was destroyed. If it was confidential or below, you could just say we destroyed the confidential material and let it go at that. But these records would have been classified higher than that, so there should be a record of their destruction. But they did say that some of the communications records had been missing from the Roswell area at that time, and I'm not sure that is significant given the way some of these things are treated. But they found no records. The only thing they found, the FBI document that we've all had for years, they couldn't even find a copy that hadn't been redacted. We all had copies so that the names that had been blacked out, we knew who they were and what was being said in the document. They found that document. They found some other things, but they didn't really find anything that was responsive. The Air Force then put out this great, huge report, which is basically a whole lot of nonsense about balloon projects in New Mexico at the time, and a lot of documentation of that, which is wholly irrelevant, and claiming, well, see, it was this flight number 4 from Project Mogul that fell, and that was what fooled everybody, and Mogul was this highly classified project. The purpose was classified, but the stuff they were doing in New Mexico was not classified. The name Mogul was known to the people who were doing it. They were using regular weather balloons, and the flight the Air Force pointed to, which was flight number 4, the man who was running the experiments in New Mexico, a guy named Dr. Albert Crary, wrote in his diary that the June 4th launch had been canceled because of clouds. They couldn't launch these things if there was clouds in the area, according to the CAA regulations they were operating under. So there was no flight number 4 to drop the debris. So they have no explanation for what fell at Roswell. So but it gets very convoluted when you look at the minutia that you have to go through to get to it, because the Air Force came out with the report and said, well, it was flight number 4, and the news media said, it's flight number 4 was a secret balloon. Let's go with that. And they don't understand all the other things, all the ancillary things that are going on around that.
So Roswell now is a long time ago. I take it your view, it was real. Something did crash. It was recovered. And what about the story of the creatures that were recovered? You think that's also authentic?
Well, first of all, everybody agrees. Skeptic, debunker, believer, whatever. Everybody agrees something fell at Roswell. We just disagree about what it was.
Right. No, my question was...
Given the evidence that I've seen, the people I've talked to, I believe it was extraterrestrial. And there is a body of testimony from some very credible people that alien creatures were recovered.
All right. Hold on. We're at a break, so we'll be back shortly. This is Midnight in the Desert. I'm Art Bell.
To initiate a dialogue sequence with Art Bell, please coordinate your phalanges and call 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CALL-ART.
All right, at this hour, we're getting breaking news. A number of suspects apparently cornered in a building in the Paris suburb of St. Denis. There has been gunfire reported. So that's breaking at this hour, ongoing and fluid at this hour. I don't imagine they'll be treated gently, although I would think they actually would want to get some alive so they can find out more about all of this. But maybe they're not particularly interested in that much information. Maybe they're more, you can imagine the police and military in France are more than a little upset about what's going on, and as they should be. And so whether anybody comes out of this alive or not, we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, that's ongoing at this hour. Once again, here is my guest, Kevin Randle. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, how you doing?
Okay, trying to keep up on events as they continue to occur. All right, so I've got a sort of an overarching question for you, Kevin, and that is this. We had Roswell. We had a number of things that have happened since. And I tried this out on Linda, and she gave me a different answer. But it seems to me that in the years since the 50s, the number of UFO reports has been trailing off. Now, I could be way off about that and wrong, but I mean, we have a world that carries high-resolution cameras around on its hip or in its pocketbook now, and you would think that the number of pictures of UFOs, if they really are hovering around out there, would be drastically increasing, or perhaps the number of UFOs hanging around out there actually isn't what it was. What's your view?
Carl Flock and I talked about this a number of years ago, and what we looked at was the number of robust cases, like that you got in the late 1940s, 1950s, into the 60s, up to about 1973 when they had the big occupant sighting wave in November of 1973. And then it trails off from that point, just as you say, and it's just not the same kind of robust sightings. You still get the lights in the sky, you still get some of that stuff, but you just don't get the numbers. And we wondered if it wouldn't be like a college expedition into an area where you found something interesting, an archaeological find. You've gone in there, you've gathered all your data, and now you're back home analyzing it, preparing for your next expedition. And we wondered if it wasn't something like that. The problem I have with the availability of cameras is it is so easy in today's world to fake a good UFO video. And it's very difficult to tell whether it's faked or not. And that's the problem I have with the UFO videos today. There's so many of them. I had a friend, Russ Estes, who made a number of years ago, made a UFO tape, a UFO sighting, a digital sighting. And he made the UFO look really, really hokey because he didn't want to find it on the internet at some point. So
you're telling, wait a minute. You're telling me, wait a minute, hold it. You're telling me he faked?
Well, but he did it on purpose to demonstrate how simple it was to fake a really good one. And he made the UFO hokey so you could tell it was fake. But he showed it coming across the sky. He made the comments that you would make, oh my God, what can that be? And that sort of thing. But he made it in such a way that it was clear that it was faked. The point being simply that in today's environment with the computer equipment that's available to practically everybody, that a 10-year-old kid could make a very convincing UFO video. The other thing that I noticed in my research was that about 99% of the UFO pictures were taken by teenage boys, and 99% of those are faked. And we have seen a lot of the great pictures from the 50s and 60s. The people who took them have come out and said, yeah, I faked that. The one exception is the Lubbock Lights from 1952 or 1951, taken by Carl Hart Jr. I was on it, part of the Roswell investigation in Lubbock in 1995, and I picked up the phone book and looked up Carl Hart just on a lark, and he had a phone number, so I called him to see what he had to say. And he said, here's a guy who is now in his 60s. If he was going to admit that he'd faked it, now was the time to do it. But he said, I still don't know what I photographed. He wasn't sure it was alien. He wasn't sure it was extraterrestrial. He was just puzzled about what he had photographed. He didn't know what it was, but he did not fake it. So there's the exception to the rule. He was 19 when he made the photographs. And like I said, I talked to him in the mid-1990s, so he was a much older gentleman. And a lot of the people, the teenagers, the young men who faked the UFO photographs would come forward and say, yeah, I faked those.
Do you, Kevin, go to recent movies? For example, did you see San Andreas?
No. I saw The Martian.
The Martian. Okay, good. That's fine. That's a good example. CGI has come so far, Kevin, that what we see on the screen can be made to look more real than real. So the end of, it's over. I mean, anything can be faked, and it can be faked to look really, really good. My experience is that if you have a blurry UFO photograph, everybody goes, another blurry photograph. If it's too clear, they go, it's too clear.
Yes, I've run into that too. No matter what you do in the way of the UFO spectrum, they're going to complain about it for some reason. But that was my point, is that the computer-generated graphics, images that you can do on your home computer can look so real.
Oh, yeah.
That you don't need a Hollywood studio. In the 1950s, there were two wonderful movies taken of UFOs, one in Great Falls, Montana in 1950 and one in Tremonton, Utah in 1952. And they're basically lights in the sky, but they were taken on 16-millimeter movie camera. And to do something like that, the people would have had to have some sophisticated Hollywood equipment to assist them in it. Today's world, my home computer can do that sort of thing and generate much better UFO photographs and footage than came out of the 1950s. All right,
so then in this modern day and age that you and I just documented, what in the world can we do to separate the wheat from the chaff anymore? Even in terms of pictures, stories, whatever.
Well, it's the same investigative problem that we've always had. It comes back to the credibility of the witness. Who took the pictures? Is it a teenage boy? Well, there's a credibility problem right there. But if you understand the background of it, if there's more than a single witness, if there's independent witnesses, what would be ideal is people in 3 separate locations photographing the same thing. and that way you could triangulate on it. You could get an idea of distance.
Yeah, well, there's been
size.
some of that. Look at Phoenix and the lights in Phoenix. How about that one?
But you could not put together the triangulation that you could if you've got a still footage. There were problems with some of it was clearly flares. Some of it was clearly a huge triangular shaped craft moving across the state of Arizona. And the photographic footage, you could not use it to triangulate that way, unfortunately.
And with that, we're going to have to leave them for today. Come back tomorrow for more UFO cover-ups with Kevin Randle and Art Bell. Till then, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Get us to the goal of 50,000 views, 1,000 subscribers. Unboxing Extra sends us those nice red box packages so we can go ahead and make sure everybody gets some nice goodies. CoinBase and Ibotta are below. You know the drill, so I'm not going to bore you. Till next time, like, share, and subscribe. Be kind to one another, and it's always a great new world to release the Krakens as we march along here from day one. Have a great evening. Enjoy your night's sleep. We'll see you tomorrow.